Hello and welcome to today's edition of Extraordinary Outcomes. I'm Shubhanjan Sarkar, your host and founder of Pitchling, the buyer-seller engagement platform. In our show today, we take a break from our regular format and start a limited series, Fixing the 5% Problem in B2B Sales. Over the course of the next 8 weeks, we will bring you engaging discussions with 24 world-renowned experts about the elephant in the sales room, the abysmally low rate of conversion in B2B sales. Today, we speak with Phil Kreindler, CEO of Infoteam Sales Process Consulting AG, Karol Mahoney, founder and chief sales coach at Unbound Growth, and Daryl Prale, CRO at VanillaSoft. We start with Daryl. Besides being the CRO at VanillaSoft, he's a top 50 sales keynote speaker, branding expert, social media influencer, category leading podcaster, and a serial entrepreneur. He has raised almost 100 million in funding, been an acquirer and acquired, and gone public. And well, how can I miss this? He has been fired only once. Great. So let's dive in, Daryl. I mean, we don't talk about this whole issue of terrible conversion rates in B2B sales. What landed us here?
So what landed us here? I think what landed us here was a complete disconnection, lack of alignment, a lack of coordination, lack of ownership between ensuring that the sales function and the marketing function work together in tandem, in unison, with shared goals and objectives, as opposed to, us versus them, which often is the case, with different compensation plans, which results in different behaviors, with different leadership that is focused only on their view of the world and not understanding the bigger picture. I can blame venture capitalists for those funding those small, rocket ships, because they tend to ignore marketing because their economic degrees from Harvard or Yale or Princeton didn't really go into marketing other than one course. They went into, simple math, which is where sales comes in. Ironically, marketing actually has more math than sales for those who care.
But what is happening in the rest of the business, in the FMCGs, in the manufacturing? There, a lot of people are really coming up from the tracks, and they are people who have spent time between marketing and sales. I know of a lot of these kind of companies where marketing folks are pushed into sales and vice versa, so that they can sort of drive. I mean, one of the ways people want to solve this marketing versus sales issue is by putting the same guys in both departments and so on, swapping the positions. What is happening there?
What's happening there? I think what you can look at there is the world changed and no one told them. And manufacturing historically has been a late adopter. They have got, so they're risk averse. So for them, manufacturing, their biggest innovation was EDI back in the 70s, electronic data interchange, where it was just trying to get some semblance of kind of inventory management. And even that rocked their world, which ironically was ahead of its time at the time. But it was only forced upon them by the big three automotive manufacturers. So these industries never change unless the people who are on top of the food chain force it down. They don't change. There's no incentive for them to change. So if 5% is the number they've got, that's just their normal, right? So they don't know that this is bad. This is the way it's always been. Many of these businesses are family run, so therefore the decisions are made in a family style. All right. Often you're not there if you're the outsider. So you may be the head of production trying to increase, production, if you will, so you can get, lower waste, higher quality, higher throughput, and they can make more money. But if the family makes decisions around the table that you're not involved in, then nothing's going to happen. And that's the issue, is that a lot of these companies, there's no desire to change. That's always the way it's been. And because it's always the way that it's been, they've never been forced to actually figure that crap out. And then if you look at, well, if we need to invest to change that, their budgets aren't structured that way. They might be investing 1%, 2% at most in marketing. You look at software, they'll invest 12% or more.
What got us here is what we discussed.
Yeah.
What I want you to tell me is, how do we get out of this?
Okay. Actually, so the answer is actually a lot easier than you think. Now, I say that I'm going through it myself. All right. So I'm going to be speaking very personally right now. Because like everybody else here, I try to make fit and work what I inherited when I took on the job. And the best thing I ever did for me, for those who find yourself in this situation, is it's nonstop communication. So I talked about lobbying and getting advocacy. Part of that is setting the stage. There's going to come a time when you're going to have to lobby for more money or more people or more technology or more process. That's going to come no matter what. If you want to change the status quo, you're going to have to make some changes, and that may cost money. The best way to do that now is to start lobbying in advance by just simply doing this. Talking nonstop with all the stakeholders that will eventually be engaged for the changes you want to do. So in my case, that's the CEO and the CFO. And what I do regularly is I just keep them apprised of my challenges. And sometimes I call them up and I just use them to vent. And I walk through and I say, this is what I'm seeing. Am I stupid? You tell me. And the reason I'm communicating up and including them in the process is so their eyes get open to the challenges I'm facing, and then they console me and they support me, and then they give me feedback, and then I can act on some of their direction. It may or may not work, but at least they feel like they're part of the process now. So when the time comes to say, where I say we need to make dramatic change, they go, "You're right. Manage up. That's your first step. You're going to take those first 3-6 months and get the lay of the land. That's why you're managing up, constantly getting the lay of the land. And you're going to observe where the process is broken. You're going to investigate everybody's complaints. Sales is going to complain that the marketing leads suck. All right, do the marketing leads suck? Why do they suck? Do you have an agreed upon definition of a marketing qualified lead? Marketing is going to complain that sales isn't following up on the leads. So when they do, they're cold, or they only call them once. Okay, investigate. Is that what's going on here? So you're identifying, like a doctor would, all of the symptoms and because it's often not just one symptom that is causing a disease, it's a collection of symptoms. The second thing you're going to do is you're then going to get the leaders, you're going to get what I call my revenue team in place. So all the people that report to me, but for most people, this is going to be the head of sales and the head of marketing. And you could have a few other people in there, maybe the head of your operations people. And you're going to put them in a room and you're going to say, okay, guys, we're going to agree on shared values, shared goals, and you're all going to be measured on it. So when I say measured on it, that means you're changing their compensation plans so they're all measured on the same thing. All right. And you're creating sales and marketing alignment through a service level agreement. This is a document that says this is what everybody commits to. So for example, sales, you're going to commit that you're going to follow up on a lead within 1 hour of getting that lead, and you're going to make maybe 7 attempts in 7 days using email, phone, social selling, yada, 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 yada. And if you don't do that, this is the consequence. And if you do that, I'm going to give you a reward financially. You're going to make more money if you do this. That's an example. So your compensation plan drives behavior, and everybody knows what the compensation plan is. Next thing is you're going to create shared KPIs. So they're going to be sales KPIs and marketing KPIs, but there's also going to be shared KPIs, such as conversion rate. Next thing is you document that process and you put it in front of freaking everybody, from the lowest SDR to the CEO of the company, so everybody understands expectations. You need this is the part where it's universal across any organization, whether you're manufacturing or high tech or pharmaceutical or professional services, an accounting firm, a PwC, is you need a hard charging champion who's going to take the hits and the blows to actually implement change. A lot of people don't know how to implement change. They don't understand it's about identifying an internal champion, creating a business case, creating consensus, creating an actual committee, committed to the change, understanding that there's going to be pain. I've been a VP of sales. I've been a VP of marketing, CMO. Most recently, I was the chief marketing officer for about 3 years when they then handed me the title of CRO. So on its own, that was, hey, weird. A marketing dude became head of all the revenue. That's uncommon. By making me CRO, it was a very strategic decision. Why the marketing guy got it is because, A, they needed somebody who owned it. We started off by saying there was nobody here who actually owned it. They needed somebody to own it. That gave me some options. I could reallocate budget, which I couldn't do before. I could, and I've done this. I've moved money from the marketing team over to the sales team to either invest in more technology, hire more people, right? I've restructured the sales team to save a little money and give it back over to marketing. The second thing I started looking at was the process. What's the process for actually identifying leads? And I recognize for us, we were historically biased on inbound leads, which is good. But on inbound sales, a pretty easy sale. You think about it, right? Because they're coming to you with high intent. They found me. They came looking. They have a problem. They went looking and they found me. And they basically came to me and they said, hey, do you guys have something that might fix my problem? So now it's just kind of like, yeah, we do. Give me your credit card and we'll hook you up. But that problem with that is that you get a couple things. You get often small deal sizes, one in a SaaS world, 1 or 2 seats. And you get high churn. Yeah, I tried it for a month or two. It didn't work. I'm out of here. So what we had to do is we had to go and overcome churn and get deal size up. Notice I'm not talking about conversion rate yet. Was we had to go and add an outbound model. So we introduced account-based marketing and selling. So now we're going out and identifying the target accounts we want to sell to. Now my conversion rate should go up because I have handpicked my sweet spot, where before it was open season for anybody to come to me. And I could safely say 80% of the people coming to me that might even buy my product were probably a bad fit for me, but I took their credit card anyway. Hence I had, not a bad, the conversion rate was okay, but they didn't stay. And then we lost money. So that's, you look at the bigger picture. We want to make money. When we went outbound, this is my ideal customer profile. And these are my target personas. And this is why these people care. So now the conversion rate should go up dramatically, but it's a different set of skills. So I've got a sweet spot. I've identified that process, but we still convert low. Why do we convert low? Because the skills suck, because they're used to inbound selling. They don't know how to outbound sell. So now we need to teach them how to do outbound selling. Well, to do outbound selling, guess what they need? They need more tools. They need some sales enablement. They need some conversational intelligence. They need. If you really want to make major gains, you've got to change it up and take risks. So what that means is you need to create a culture of controlled experimentation within your organization that says, okay, we're going to do this crazy marketing campaign we've never done before. It's a completely different take from everything we've done. It's a different voice. It's a different audience. Oh my gosh, I don't know if it's going to work. And you say, fine. All right, so let's control it. We'll do an A/B test. Half will be a control like we've always done. Half will be this new one. And it's okay if this experiment fails. We'll do it in a small attempt first. And then if it works, we'll go bigger. Because the point is, that's the only way you'll ever make dramatic changes is by actually taking big risk. And you don't discipline your employees for saying, I want to take this risk. You help them take the risk in a controlled fashion. And if it fails, you don't say this is all your fault, you suck, because you were part of the process. You say, okay, what did we learn from this? Let's not make that mistake again. We're smarter now than we were before. We've learned that this doesn't work. But what's amazing is that a lot of things will work.
Yes.
What I just described is what most people don't do when they try to fix that 5%. They panic and they go into let's do 1,000 robocalls instead of 100 because that'll get us, it's a numbers game and I won't be around to clean up the mess. Venture capitalists great for that. I won't be around to clean up the mess. I'll be moved on. Or they can lobby, get champions and advocates, and get buy-in on a plan that buys them the time they need, a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever the hell it is, money, people to fix the problem. So nobody's thinking strategically, nobody's thinking long-term. Why? Because often you have venture capitalists saying, I need an immediate return because we have an exit strategy for you because my portfolio needs you to make a return from me within 3 years max. And part of that means we have to get you to unicorn status and blah, 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 blah. So you have competing agendas. That's how we got here, in my opinion. Wow, I just said a lot. I apologize.
Coming up next is Karol Mahoney, founder and chief sales coach at Unbound Growth. Karol has been called the sales therapist by a Harvard Business School professor, where she coaches entrepreneurial MBA students on sales. She has been featured as a top 15 sales influencer by LinkedIn, a woman to watch in sales by Sales Hacker, and a top sales coach by Ambition. Here is Karol. Karol, welcome to Extraordinary Outcomes and the special segment of fixing the 5% conversion problem in B2B sales. I'm delighted to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Sumanjan. This is an interesting topic. I had to take a few moments to think about sort of the direction here, and I think it's an important thing to discuss.
Wonderful. So let's dive right in. Tell me, what do you attribute the problem to? How did we land ourselves here?
If only it were one simple answer that would magically unlock all of the mysteries that why this is happening, but it's multiple reasons that sort of feed off of each other. I think that first and foremost is, we attract leads that maybe aren't the most qualified leads in the sense that these are not our ideal buyers. And so if we look at how we're attracting people in the first place, both in marketing and in sales hiring, who are we attracting? Are we doing the right kind of matchmaking here? That's essentially how I look at marketing, is that our job is to attract the attention and the interest and maybe spark a little bit of desire to want some kind of a solution or problem to solve. And I think if you look at also the studies from Serious Decisions and Gartner and Forrester that say that buyers are such a percentage all the way through their process because they need someone to help educate them and inform them of their options because the internet is overwhelming. And so I think that the first problem is that when we can't buy into the idea that buyers don't want to talk to sellers, because there is research that also says that they do want to engage with them, but they want to engage with them in a way that is collaborative, that makes them think differently about their problems, makes their options clear, helps them to lay out the consequences of each option. The job of a seller today is as a consultant. And so I think they need to actually be involved in the leads much earlier than a quote unquote sales qualified lead, because a lot has happened before that point that they have had no influence or collaboration with. I think that the other big problem that we have is who and how we're hiring salespeople, because again, if we're trying to match our ideal buyer with our ideal seller, it's not good enough to go off of subjective opinions. It's not good enough to, well, this is what we did at a previous company, or this is what our competitors are doing. We're going to hire the top salesperson from the biggest company in our space. Just because it worked there or worked before doesn't mean it's going to work now with your buyer in your market against your competition. It is a match, like a snowflake. It's going to be unique. So I think there's that problem as well. And then there's, how do we actually onboard our salespeople? Is it, all right, here's how to get to email and how to get to Zoom, and here's your Skype account. And then product, followed by deep dive into the CRM and sales process, followed by here's our product, deep dive into that. And then the buyer is, somewhere week 5 or 6. And then we're surprised when our sellers get on the phone and product pitch, talk too much, talk all about themselves and the company, and don't ask enough questions, don't collaborate with their buyers, don't understand their world before they ever stop talking about their solution. I think that's the problem as well. It is a problem both with leadership and with the salesperson that we're hiring, and that we're not doing a discovery question. But to use your metaphor of the doctor, who you can go to the doctor and say, hey, doc, I have all of these issues and symptoms and problems. If he doesn't know the medicines that will solve the problem, that's an issue. But I think that the bigger issue is that if you go to the doctor, they ask you a couple of surface level questions to understand which medicine should I subscribe without ever digging deep enough to understand why you're even having the issue to begin with. Because a medicine, a pill, a technology solution, a service is a Band-Aid if it doesn't address the root cause of the problem that the buyer has. We both agree that sales is the lifeblood of any business. It is the lifeblood of our economy. It is also the second most distrusted profession in the world. And that is something that seeps into organizations, both at the leadership level, right at the very top, the founders of these companies, the presidents and the CEOs, and their mindset towards sales. It then creates a culture and environment that breeds beliefs and mindsets that don't allow these things to happen. And you can see that, for example, for managers who are being pulled in every direction except coaching their salespeople and training their salespeople, which I don't care what study or research you find will show you that that is the most likely predictable way to increase performance. But that's the last thing that managers do. Like 7% of managers worldwide are strong sales coaches. That's dismal. So there's issue number 1, or 12, however you want to look at it. But then you also have to think about what are the beliefs that the sellers have when they're trying to execute. Like, why aren't they asking? What is stopping them from asking those deeper questions? And that often comes from a belief or a mindset or the pressures that are being placed on them to make a call number, to make a meeting number, to make a, deal opportunity creation number without looking at the quality of what's actually going on. So we dump more effort, we dump more leads in a funnel, and it all comes leaking out through marketing, through sales, through all of these different places, because it's so expensive to try to dump leads into a funnel that has all kinds of holes in it and is leaking. Like I used to use the metaphor of, imagine poor Jack and Jill when they went up the hill to fetch a pail of water and the pail was full of holes. How many times did they have to go back and forth? So I think the question we have to ask is, where's the biggest hole that we need to plug our finger into to stop the biggest bleeding? And depending on your company, it could be your hiring process. I know a lot of companies are starting to hire right now, and I'm having conversations with them where they have a success rate of 1 in 5, 2 in 5 of their salespeople that are succeeding, that they hire them and 2 weeks later realize that they're not going to get on the phones. They're not going to follow up. They're not going to ask these questions and dig deeper into buyer problems, no matter how much we train, because they're not coachable or it's a square peg in a round hole. I think that's where the biggest problem starts, which then you'll start to unravel some other things that happen.
Absolutely. So let me ask you now, what is the solution? What are the steps, I guess,
Yeah,
that
I think Yeah, so the steps to get to the solution for your organization, because there's no one fits all solution. And I'm not going to tell you, oh, my program is the perfect one for everybody, because it's not perfect for everybody. But I think that what you need to think of as a sales leader is, how do I take the bias and opinion and guesswork out of my sales operation, my sales strategy, and my sales team? And we're using the metaphor of the doctor. So let's think about this for a minute. If you think back to the 19th century, when medicine was, a religion, they were seen as barbarians. They were seen as, people who just blindly followed the teachings of a few based on myth or whatever. And it wasn't based on the scientific process. It wasn't until the Renaissance started and they started to introduce the scientific process into medicine through dissection and experimentation that they actually started to gain the respectability that we take for granted today. If you look at the medical profession then to where the sales profession is now, I think that the answer is the same. We need to use objectivity, we need to use data, we need to use science to design who we hire, how we train them, how we create the solutions for the people that we're trying to help. And it's not impossible. There is data out there. There is science that tells us how people buy and make decisions and change behaviors. And it does still come down to mindsets and beliefs, but those mindsets and beliefs become behaviors that then become our results. And when we can understand, like, you don't have to be a scientist or a PhD to understand those types of concepts. And so when you look at your hiring process, if you look at all of these types of things and you look at, where am I basing this decision on the opinions of a few and my own subjective experiences, and where can I start to reduce that? So, for example, we use objective data in the hiring process, that 2 million sales professionals who've been evaluated on 282 attributes over 30 years across the globe in all industries. I'm going to rely on that data versus the 100 or so companies that I've worked with or that someone else has worked with. There's just more predictability there, right? But then I'm also looking at, how can we design our hiring programs and our training and coaching programs for leadership, managers, and sellers, where we're taking into account the biases that we have and how we learn and how we make decisions and change behaviors, versus the latest fad, the latest methodology. Let's base it on the actuality of what happens in our human brains when we need to learn. And there are ways that we can do that. That's how we design our programs at Unbound Growth. But I think that any organization can take a look at, where do we have our biggest fall-offs, whether that's, the conversion rates that you're having in your marketing. How are we really speaking about buyers? Are we talking to buyers, or are we talking about how wonderful we are? Like, here's a quick test. Go look at all of your marketing and sales copy and count every word where you say I, me, we, or our, and then compare that to every word that then talks about your buyer, you, yours, and then compare them. Is the we factor all the way up here and the buyer factor all the way down here? That's the quick way to see, are we talking about the buyer's problems or what we do? There's one place. You can look at your hiring process. How are we building our ideal customer profile? Is it based off of what we think are success things? Like I talk to leaders and they say, well, I need someone who's curious and detail oriented. And I'm like, great. Have you ever seen a salesperson who is detail oriented and curious fail? If the answer is yes, then that is not predictable, objective data that you're going to be able to use to hire your next person, because interviews are subjective. So how do we reduce that subjectivity? Use a pre-screening and assessment so that you're only interviewing people who have the right attributes to be successful in the role. And then how we're coaching and training. Most managers are not training every other day or even once a week. It's maybe once every other week, maybe once a month. And their idea of coaching, because that's what happened with them when they were sellers, is you do a pipeline review, you ask about every deal, what's going to happen next and where the gaps are into them. That's coaching. It's not coaching. It's a pipeline review. It's an accountability meeting. So we need to change the way that we think about coaching and training so that it's not we're going to cram this information down your throat, you're going to forget half of it in a week, and then we're going to expect you to change everything about the way that you sell after this training program. It's just not going to happen. So those are just a couple of areas where I see the biggest opportunities for data and science to make an impact in the performance and the conversion rates that we're seeing in B2B sales. And I'll say one last thing. I hear this a lot too, is, well, what should my conversion rate be? What's the industry average? What's my competitor's conversion rate? Again, it's apples and oranges because it's not your buyer, it's not your market, it's not your company, and it's not your offering. So look at whatever your conversion rate is now, and then look at where your goals are and what does that conversion rate need to improve on in order for you to get there? What's the gap? And then once you've identified what the gap is, what am I willing to invest to bridge that gap? What is it worth to me? And then what does that look like? We tend to have this reaction to what we see in our numbers. Meetings are down, activities are down, conversion rates are down. And so we start throwing things at it from our offices because we're worried about 6 to 12 months down the road of what's going to happen if those things continue. And you should be worried, but the reaction that most leaders have is to throw some immediate action on it. Like I've talked with owners who said, my salespeople aren't doing anything. They're not doing anything. There's nothing happening because there's no sales coming in yet. And so then they blast off with, okay, we're going to do this now. We're going to do that now. We're going to do this now. And they're creating the chaos that their sellers can't seem to get through to actually make some headway and improvement. So we need to also, as leaders, think about what's our attitude towards sales? How do we react when things are not going so well? And how do we need to change that? Because that's going to have a huge impact as it does. It's a trickle down effect to your leaders, your managers, your sellers, all the way to your BDRs, and face first into your customer. Yeah, we're great at talking about the wonderful things that we do in sales, but it's in the failings that we learn the most. And I think as leaders, especially as sales leaders, if we can share our failings, that also then makes it easier for our team to share theirs. And then we get a clear idea of what is happening in our sales organizations and what's not working. But the fear of getting fired or demoted or seen as less than in sales organizations is what doesn't cause our sellers to say, I'm struggling here. And so they continue to struggle and we don't know why and we don't know how to fix it. And then they either get fired, they leave a bad Glassdoor review, and then the cycle continues and continues and continues.
And finally, meet Phil Kreindler, CEO of Infoteam Sales Process Consulting AG. Infoteam has trained professionals in leading organizations around the globe like ABB, Allianz, CGI, Credit Suisse, EY, HP, KPMG, PwC, SAP, Siemens, Sika, Sprint, US Bank, and Vodafone, to name a few. Phil has published articles about the success factors in B2B selling in the Harvard Business Review and is the author of the award-winning book, Customized Selling, Learn How Customers Want You to Sell. Everybody, meet Phil.
Phil, welcome to this special section on the extraordinary outcomes. I'm delighted to have you, especially because you could make time and early in the morning. So let's dive right in. There is this elephant in the room that we want to address, and we believe people are not talking about, which is the extremely poor conversion rate in B2B sales, from lead to conversion rate. The percentage, and I'm told that you can slice and dice percentages any which way you like, but these are respectable research agencies whose other data is very well accepted, who talk of anything between 1.8% to 5, 6, 7% of conversion. Mostly, there are of course some segments where the conversion rate is more, but mostly in B2B sales, it is hovering in the lower single digit. What do you think? Is there a really elephant there, or is it something somebody's imagining?
So I think the 5% figure that you're mentioning is, first of all, it needs to be clearly defined. Yeah, what is actually a lead? So coming back to the example I just gave you, I would say somebody downloading an ebook, maybe he's just educating himself on the topic of the sales process. That is, cannot be rated at the same level as somebody who's calling us with a concrete need. So I think the 5% figure that you're mentioning, in my personal opinion, would suit better to the first category, which I wouldn't call a lead in myself. I would call it a name, a suspect, yeah, but definitely not a lead.
What, from your vantage point, do you see are the real challenges that any sales organization in a B2B space is facing? Of course, I mean, as you said, if you slice it down, challenges in manufacturing could be different from challenges in hospitality or challenges in transportation and logistics and so on. But broadly, if you are able to sort of say, Shubhanjan, these are the top 3 things I see across sectors, what would they be?
I think the key areas are in the execution of a good sales process. Yeah, I mean there are dozens of success factors, but let's just look at a couple of them. I think right now the quantification of the benefits is particularly important. Yeah, it's often called a business case. So it's absolutely crucial that the salespeople are working on opportunities and that they are creating a business case and including that in their proposal to help their customers justify the investment. So basically, good salespeople are people who are increasing the importance of the topic in the customer's organization. If you don't have a business case these days, it's going to be very, very difficult. You're not going to lose to the competition, but you're likely to end up losing to no decision. The procurement people often get involved at the end. Yeah, there is an evaluation, and that's where it's the business people who are sort of making the recommendation. Let me give you an example. We have right now a few customers who have BMW as one of their largest customers. So the procurement policy at BMW is that the business side basically has to come up with 3 recommendations, 3 companies. Yeah, the solutions are designed to be very similar. Yeah, and then it's handed over to procurement. All right. So I think the impact of the sales process and what the customer experience, I think it is very valid with all the business decision makers. Yeah. I don't think it's not valid with procurement. Yeah. They're also looking to work with professional salespeople. Yeah. But obviously they're involved at the end to get the better price. Companies were senior sales executives, for example, they were able to choose their own CRM system. They were able to choose their own sales methodology up till maybe 10 years ago. These days, they've got to go through an evaluation process. So there are corporate guidelines in the company which says you've got to look at 5 to 7 companies. There are no preferences, and this formal process has really gone a little bit out of control. Yeah, well, it's in my opinion. Yeah, Whether it actually results in the best solution being bought, I would question that. So what I'm trying to say is that this very standardized process that procurement, whether they are strategic procurement people or more tactical procurement people, this very stringent process, yeah, I wonder whether that actually results in buying the best solution.
What I want you to tell me is, how do we get out of this?
Let me give you an example quickly of a strategic way of procuring that I think does result in buying the best solution. So one of our clients it's a large Big Four player, and they recently won a deal at a large German chemicals company. Yeah. And what the chemicals company did, the procurement said they want to, in the first stage, they want to have a 5-page PowerPoint presentation, no more than 5 pages, about how they would respond to this particular need. Yeah, no more than 5 pages. Then they said they're going to go down from 12 vendors down to 3 vendors. And then for each of those remaining 3 vendors, they're going to give each of them a 1-day workshop where they're going to be able to meet all the members of the buying committee or the buying center, and where the customer expects to meet all the people who are going to be involved in the delivery. And they could do a 1-day workshop. Yeah. Now, that is a very smart way of doing things. Yeah. Shortlisting things first, and then going back to the idea of, creating an environment where buying and selling is based on trust and real capabilities and not what people fill out in an Excel table. Let's assume that a company is doing an RFP process, yeah, and they're looking at 5 to 7 vendors. Yeah, that's quite typical. Yeah, they have a procurement process which says that they've got to look at 5 to 7 vendors. In many businesses, the offerings are actually quite comparable. Okay, so what makes the difference between whether you are, just another column in an Excel table or whether you win the business? In a world where you use the word commodity, I would say the offerings are quite comparable with each other. Yeah. So in that situation where you are lacking USPs, what we believe is that your sales approach must be perceived as a USP. You have to design every single step of the sales process so that it is perceived as an ideal customer experience. So I feel that most salespeople are not that smart. They look for USPs in their products, in their solutions, in their company, but they don't really every day work on their own sales process and continually improve, become better to make it an ideal customer experience. Obviously, the value proposition is very important, yeah? That they are articulating a value proposition, not just the business value, but they're also focusing on the different goals and decision criteria of the different members of the buying center. And what is absolutely critical is that you are supporting your customer in internal selling. Most people these days, they still do not have, or most companies, they don't have a framework for preparing and conducting good first meetings. You mentioned my book before, based on what customers expect from good first meetings. Yeah. So they're not as professional. So it's the business case, it's the buying center. They're not nearly as professional that they need to be. Selling, in my opinion, is about enabling your customer to get internal buy-in. So good salespeople who have a very high win rate are people who are focused on helping their customer to get internal buy-in, maybe from people that the salesperson themselves doesn't have any contact to. Assuming that you do not have total coverage of the buying center. So you're more and more, you're relying on your existing contacts, yeah, who, you've got their trust. You've done a very, very good sales process, extremely professional, yeah, they trust you. And then you end up relying on those people to sell your solution internally. And in my opinion, most salespeople don't equip their contacts with the right type of information in the right format that they need to do that internal selling. Coming to, giving you an example. One of our largest customers is an insurance company, German insurance company called Allianz. And we won a very large corporate assignment for their B2B, not where they sell to business to consumer, but the B2B part. There were about 15 people involved in the decision. Yeah, we did all the things I mentioned before, covering the buying center, making sure that the customer not just read our value proposition, but experienced our value proposition. But we still ended up lacking contact to about 8 key people. Yeah, if we had tried to get access to those people, it most probably would not have been a good idea. Yeah, so the information we prepared for our supporters was in a format that they needed for internal communication, and it helped them shine. I always say, it made them look good in the eyes of other people. And that's also part of ICE, ideal customer experience, is that the customer feels that you are providing them with information that they need to get the buy-in from, other people in the buying center.
Check out the stellar lineup for next week. You will meet Bob Apollo, founder, Inflection Point Strategy Partners, Fred Diamond, president and co-founder of the Institute for Excellence in Sales, and Julie Hansen, founder of the Selling on Video Masterclass.
It's why using BANT, budget, authority, need, and time frame, is such an inappropriate way of qualifying early stage opportunities. Because if you wait until a customer has formal budget, has full authority, has a clearly defined need, has a defined timetable, they are already a long way down their decision-making process. So it might seem to extend the sales cycle, but you're not really extending the buying cycle by getting involved early. You're finding yourself at a point in the customer's buying cycle where you can actually do something to influence their thinking.
Sales professionals moving forward have to be elite. So we're using the word elite a lot at the Institute for Excellence in Sales, because sales professionals, to be valuable and credible and worthwhile to their companies moving forward, they need to be able to crisply understand the needs of their customer. They need to crisply understand how their technology or solutions play that role. And they need to be thinking 1 to 3 years out, right? About where the customer is going. It's a challenge for the SDR position to be looking further out, because their job is, okay, here's the 20, 50, 100 calls you need to make today, because we believe that's an important metric. Goes back to what you were saying, because of decades of sales process. So what we're seeing at the Institute for Excellence in Sales with companies like Amazon and Salesforce and Red Hat, companies that are members of the IES, is that they're taking a more forward look into equipping their people so that they understand the challenges that their customer is going to be going through, not today, right, but into the future.
All of those factors are often present at the same time, and that creates a lot of pressure in that BDR to just do the very basic of qualification without really discovering why does this person need a solution, which allows the AE or the SE to go in and develop a presentation or a demo that's really going to address their specific needs. So it just becomes too automated, I guess, a process, because they're just the BDR is just trying to check off some boxes and move it forward. So I think taking the time to really understand just how critical that role is, and giving them, I guess, the space and the tools and the skills to manage that conversation well is really critical, as opposed to just get this information, move it forward, right?
I'm super excited about this series. My guests certainly were, and I can't wait to hear from you. What do you think about this elephant in the sales room? Please use the link below to record your views in video, and we will start incorporating them into the show in the following episodes. Time to wrap up for today. Remember, you will soon have access to the complete interviews and transcripts. Keep an eye out for the link in the EXO newsletter. And thank you for watching. Until next time, stay well and convert more.